The air in the canyon hung heavy, not with the usual desert heat, but with a sudden, unnatural silence. Elias Thorne, a veteran Grand Canyon park ranger whose boots knew every inch of this ancient land, felt it first in the soles of his feet, then deep in his bones. He had been tracking a rogue bighorn sheep, a routine task, when the ground beneath him had shifted, not a tremor, but a subtle give. He knelt, brushing away loose scree, and then he saw it. Not rock, not fossilized wood, but something far more impossible. A massive, smooth curve of bone, impossibly large, jutting from the red earth. It was unlike anything he had ever encountered in his decades patrolling the canyon. Too perfect, too immense to be natural geology. His breath hitched. Before he could even process the full scope of his discovery, the silence was shattered by the whirring thrum of a helicopter, descending rapidly from the sapphire sky. It was too fast, too precise. Elias hadn't even had time to radio it in. A sleek, black craft, no park service markings, settled on a nearby plateau, kicking up a storm of dust and loose rock. From its belly emerged a figure as cold and sharp as the canyon's winter wind. Director Vance. Vance moved with an unnerving efficiency, his eyes dark and unreadable, sweeping over the scene, dismissing Elias with a glance before fixing on the exposed bone. "Ranger Thorne?" Vance's voice cut through the helicopter's fading thrum, devoid of warmth or surprise. "A geological anomaly, nothing more." His words were clipped, authoritative, a pronouncement rather than an observation. Behind him, a team of similarly dressed figures, all business and no small talk, fanned out, already setting up equipment, their movements practiced, almost rehearsed. They moved like shadows, erecting temporary barriers, deploying ground-penetrating radar, and meticulously covering the exposed bone with reinforced tarpaulins. The sheer arrogance of the dismissal, the immediate, almost pre-planned cover-up, made Elias's stomach clench. It was a slap in the face to truth, to discovery, to everything he believed in. But Elias didn't panic. There was no fear in his eyes, only a steely, knowing glint that had been forged over years of quiet observation and a deep distrust of official narratives. He watched Vance, studied the rapid movements of his team, and then, with a subtle, almost imperceptible shift of his foot, he nudged something small and irregular further under the loose soil. It was a shard, a piece of the impossibly large bone, broken off during the initial ground shift. Unlike the main structure, this fragment was small enough to conceal a tangible piece of evidence. He knew what he had found, and he knew they knew it too. This wasn't just a geological anomaly. It was a secret, and some secrets, he mused, refused to stay buried. Vance gave a curt nod to his team leader, then turned back to Elias, flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "This area is now restricted, Ranger. National security protocols." He didn't wait for a reply, turning on his heel and re-entering the helicopter. Within minutes, the black craft ascended, a dark smudge against the vast canyon wall, carrying Vance and his team into the depths of the canyon, leaving Elias alone. The silence returned, deeper, heavier than before. The vast silent canyon seemed to hold its breath, a colossal witness to the lie. Elias stood there, the small, unusual bone fragment hidden in his pocket, the canyon wind whispering ancient secrets around him. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Elias Thorne was more than just a park ranger. He was a living extension of the Grand Canyon itself. His life had been woven into its fabric for over 30 years, each wrinkle on his weathered face telling a story of sun-baked trails and silent, star-filled nights. He knew the canyon's moods, understood its whispers, and recognized the subtle shifts in its ancient heart. For decades, he had walked its hidden paths, discovered forgotten caves that held secrets older than human memory, and listened with respect to the indigenous legends that spoke of spirits and past worlds. His dedication wasn't just a job. It was a quiet, almost spiritual devotion to the natural world, a deep reverence for its raw power and untouched beauty. His days were a rhythmic dance with the canyon. He'd rise with the first blush of dawn, the air crisp and clean, and set out on solitary hikes, his worn boots crunching on the gravel. He knew every twist of the Colorado River, every crevice in the layered rock faces. He'd often spend hours simply observing, watching the light play across the vast expanse, feeling the immense silence broken only by the cry of a hawk or the rustle of a lizard. His humble cabin, perched precariously on a cliff edge, was more sanctuary than home, filled with old maps, geology books, and sketches of unusual rock formations he'd encountered. He had a fascination with anything that hinted at the unexplained within the canyon's depths, always careful to document what he saw, even if it defied conventional explanation. This quiet dedication, however, came with a subtle vulnerability. Years ago, Elias had stumbled upon a strange rock formation, one that seemed to defy geological norms. He'd reported it, expecting scientific curiosity, but instead met with bureaucratic indifference, then outright suppression. Official reports had been altered, his observations dismissed as an overzealous imagination. It was a minor incident, really, but it had planted a seed of distrust, a deep-seated suspicion of official narratives, especially when they touched upon the canyon's more peculiar anomalies. He'd learned then that some truths were inconvenient, and that those in power preferred neat, explainable boxes. That experience had also given him his first brief encounter with Director Vance. Even then, Vance was a rising figure, a man known for his cold efficiency and an almost surgical precision in handling sensitive situations. Elias remembered the brief, unsettling conversation, Vance's eyes like chips of ice, his words smooth, but with an underlying threat. Vance had overseen the containment of that minor finding, ensuring it disappeared from official records and public discourse. He was a master of information management, a term that always made Elias's skin crawl. The memory of that encounter now sharpened the edges of Elias's resolve, confirming his initial instincts about Vance and the forces he represented. Elias's profound connection to the canyon wasn't just about its physical grandeur, it was about its history, its unseen depths, and the stories it held. He often felt like a guardian of those secrets, a quiet observer of things that most people never noticed. This deep bond, this intuitive understanding of the canyon's true nature, was what made him uniquely positioned to challenge the cover-up he now faced. He wasn't just a ranger. He was the canyon's witness, its memory keeper, and now its protector. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his gut, that the truth he held in his hand, the small bone fragment hidden in his pocket, was far more significant than any geological anomaly Vance could ever invent. The canyon had shown him its secrets before, and it was showing them again. And this time he wouldn't let them be buried. The deep-seated distrust Elias held wasn't born from a single incident, but rather from a slow, grinding accumulation of minor, yet profoundly unsettling encounters. These moments, spread over years, had chipped away at his belief in authority, especially when it concerned the Grand Canyon's more inexplicable phenomena. He remembered the first time nearly 15 years ago when he'd reported strange light patterns deep within a seldom visited gorge. He'd meticulously documented everything, even sketching the precise movements. His supervisor, a well-meaning but by-the-book man, had forwarded the report up the chain. What came back wasn't an investigation, but a carefully worded memo about atmospheric refractions and trick photography, accompanied by a subtle suggestion that Elias might be overworking himself. It wasn't a direct dismissal of his character, but it was enough to make him feel like his eyes, his experiences, were being questioned. Then there were the promises. So many promises of transparency from government officials. He recalled a delegation that visited after a series of unusual seismic readings. They spoke eloquently of scientific collaboration, of shared knowledge, of the Grand Canyon being a national treasure requiring open study. But when Elias tried to share his own observations about geological anomalies that didn't fit the official narrative, the smiles tightened. The promises evaporated. He was told his data was preliminary, unverified, and not relevant to the current investigation. It was a familiar pattern: engage, reassure, then subtly sideline. Over time, these subtle attempts at discrediting his observations became more overt. A few years after the seismic incident, he found himself being called into meetings where his geological theories, honed by decades of direct observation, were dismissed by young, eager government geologists who had likely spent more time in a laboratory than in the field. They spoke of established models, of peer-reviewed data, and conveniently ignored the anomalies Elias had personally witnessed. He felt like he was speaking a different language, one rooted in the raw, unfiltered reality of the canyon, while they spoke in carefully constructed academic jargon designed to maintain the status quo. The veiled threats about national security were perhaps the most insidious. They never came as direct accusations, but as quiet, almost paternal warnings. "Elias," one official had said, his voice low and concerned, "we understand your passion for the canyon, but some things, for the safety of everyone, need to remain unexamined. You wouldn't want to inadvertently compromise national security, would you?" It was a chilling implication, suggesting that his pursuit of truth could somehow endanger his country. It left him with a knot in his stomach, a feeling that he was walking a tightrope and one misstep could have serious consequences. He even remembered the manipulation tactics. There was a period where he was offered several promotions, each designed to pull him away from his beloved canyon. A supervisory role in a national park far to the north, a desk job in Washington overseeing park logistics. They were presented as opportunities, advancements, but Elias saw through them. They were attempts to extract him from the very place that gave him his insights, to remove him from the front lines of discovery. He politely declined each one, choosing instead to remain a simple park ranger, close to the earth, close to the secrets he knew it held. These moments, while seemingly small in isolation, demonstrated a clear and consistent pattern of systemic suppression of information. Elias understood that the discovery he had made in Part 1 was not an isolated event, a sudden stumble upon something new. Instead, it was the culmination of years of quiet resistance, a slow-burning defiance against an oppressive information control machine that had been operating in the shadows for decades. He had seen its gears turn before, felt its heavy hand, and understood its methods. The narrative that the official channels presented was rarely the full truth. Elias had learned this lesson through countless small battles, through the steady erosion of his trust. He knew that when it came to the Grand Canyon's deeper mysteries, the government preferred a clean, simple story, one that didn't challenge established beliefs or hint at ancient, unsettling truths. The canyon was more than just a geological wonder. It was a repository of forgotten histories, a silent witness to phenomena that defied modern understanding. And Elias, through his years of quiet observation and his personal history of being dismissed, had become the reluctant guardian of those untold stories. A man acutely aware that the official narrative was often just a carefully constructed curtain, hiding a much larger, more incredible reality. The atmosphere around Elias, already thick with unspoken tensions, grew increasingly suffocating after his latest discovery. It wasn't immediate, but a subtle shift, a tightening of the air he breathed, became undeniable. Unmarked vehicles, dark sedans he hadn't seen before, started appearing with unsettling regularity near the access road to his remote cabin. They never stopped, never engaged, just drove by slowly, their tinted windows hiding any faces within. It was a silent assertion of presence, a constant reminder that he was being watched. He began noticing faint clicks and static on his landline, brief interruptions that suggested his communications were no longer private. Even his old, reliable radio, usually a clear lifeline to the outside world, crackled with unusual interference whenever he tried to talk to anyone beyond the immediate park perimeter. Discussions with his fellow rangers, once easy and candid, became strained. A palpable sense of unease permeated the park, a quiet anxiety that spread like a slow-moving fire. Whispers of unusual activity and increased security protocols from higher-ups circulated, always vague, always just out of reach of direct questioning. Some rangers, loyal to the system, started to eye Elias with a mix of suspicion and pity. Others, those who had known him longer, offered sympathetic but guarded glances, their silence speaking volumes. They knew Elias wasn't one to invent stories, but the pressure to conform, to not rock the boat, was immense. The camaraderie that had once defined their shared purpose in the canyon began to fray. Replaced by a cautious distance, social pressure began to mount in more overt ways. Local news outlets, which had always portrayed Elias as a respected, if somewhat eccentric figure, started running stories with a different tone. Anonymous sources, clearly fed by official channels, subtly discredited him. Articles hinted at his advanced age and isolated living, suggesting he might be prone to hallucinations or exaggeration. They never directly accused him of lying, but the implication was clear. Elias Thorne, the beloved ranger, was losing his grip, becoming unreliable. He saw his carefully built reputation, earned over decades of dedicated service, being systematically dismantled piece by piece. People he had known for years, local shopkeepers, hikers he'd helped, started to look at him differently with a mixture of curiosity and concern, as if he had suddenly become a character in a strange, unfolding drama. Director Vance's presence, though rarely direct, was a constant, chilling undercurrent. Elias felt him not as a physical threat, but as a pervasive, unseen force. Vance's methods were insidious, designed for psychological warfare. Elias didn't need to see the man. He felt his influence in every suspicious glance, every strained conversation, every subtle smear in the local paper. It was a campaign to isolate him, to break his spirit, to make him question his own sanity. He would wake up in the dead of night, the silence of his cabin amplifying his thoughts, wondering if he was indeed just an old man chasing shadows, if the constant pressure was making him imagine things. The artifact, the small unusual bone fragment, became his anchor, his tangible proof against the gaslighting. He held it often, feeling its strange texture, reminding himself of what he had seen, what he knew. The psychological toll was immense. Elias, a man who had always found peace in solitude, now found himself feeling profoundly alone, cut off from the very community he had served. The vast, silent canyon, once his sanctuary, now seemed to echo with the unseen eyes and unheard whispers of those watching him. He was at the peak of emotional suffocation, feeling the full, crushing weight of the government's power bearing down on him. They were pushing him to the brink, trying to force him to surrender, to recant, to simply disappear into the background. But as the pressure intensified, a different kind of resolve began to harden within him. They wanted him to break, but they had underestimated the quiet strength forged over decades in the unforgiving wilderness. The same wilderness that now held the secret they so desperately wanted to keep buried. This wasn't just about a bone anymore. It was about his life, his truth, and the integrity of the canyon itself. The oppressive weight, the constant surveillance, and the psychological games had pushed Elias to his absolute limit, but not in the way Vance intended. Instead of breaking him, it forged a new resolve, a desperate courage born from isolation. He made his move under the cloak of a moonless night, the canyon wind his only witness. His intimate knowledge of the Grand Canyon, honed over decades, became his shield and his weapon. He moved silently, a ghost in the landscape, using forgotten game trails and shadowed ravines that no satellite or drone could easily track. He left his cabin not with a frantic escape, but with the calculated precision of a seasoned hunter. His destination was a hidden cache, a small, cleverly concealed alcove deep within a remote section of the canyon he had prepared years ago for unforeseen circumstances. It was a place known only to him, a sanctuary of forgotten truths. Inside, carefully protected from the elements, was his life's work. A meticulously organized collection of photographs, geological samples, and old hand-drawn maps. These weren't just random curiosities. They were decades of evidence, pieced together from his solitary explorations, whispers from indigenous elders, and anomalies dismissed by official channels. Each photograph depicted unusual rock formations, strange markings, or faint outlines that hinted at structures far older than any recorded civilization. The geological samples, labeled with precise coordinates, contained unique mineral compositions he couldn't identify, hinting at non-terrestrial origins or unknown geological processes. The maps, overlaid with his own secret notations, marked areas of unexplained energy fluctuations and consistent patterns of unusual phenomena. Among these carefully guarded treasures, Elias found what he was truly looking for: a leather-bound journal, brittle with age, its pages filled with elegant, faded script. It was the forgotten journal of an early 20th century explorer, a man named Professor Alistair Finch, who had vanished without a trace in the canyon in 1928. Elias had stumbled upon it years ago in a collapsed cave and had spent months painstakingly deciphering its contents. Finch's entries were astonishingly similar to Elias's own experiences. The professor wrote of strange, colossal bone fragments, unlike any known species, of ancient structures partially buried by shifting sands, and of a palpable sense of something immense and hidden beneath the canyon's surface. More chillingly, Finch also detailed his own encounters with shadowy figures, men in suits who dismissed his findings as hallucinations and geological anomalies, pressuring him to abandon his research. The parallels were undeniable, a historical echo of the very cover-up Elias was now facing. This journal wasn't just a curiosity, it was a powerful corroboration, connecting his contemporary discovery to a century-long pattern of suppression. As Elias reread Finch's frantic final entries, a cryptic message jumped out at him, a series of seemingly disjointed coordinates and a reference to the place where the sun sleeps. He cross-referenced these with his own extensive maps, carefully piecing together the fragmented clues. The coordinates didn't match any known trails or official survey points. Instead, they pointed to a remote, utterly unexplored section of the canyon, a labyrinth of hidden passages and sheer cliffs, a place so treacherous it had remained untouched by modern exploration. It was a place that existed only in ancient native legends, and now in Finch's journal. This was it. This was his final, desperate gambit. If the journal was to be believed, this uncharted territory held the key, a deeper secret that had eluded even the most thorough government searches. It was a dangerous, almost suicidal undertaking, venturing into an area notorious for its unforgiving terrain and sudden, deadly rockfalls. But Elias knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this was where the truth lay buried, waiting to be rediscovered. The act of deciphering Finch's cryptic message and charting a course into the unknown broke the cycle of fear that Vance had tried to impose. Elias was no longer a man reacting to pressure. He was a man on a mission, driven by a profound need to expose the truth that had been hidden for far too long. He had shifted from passive resistance to active pursuit, ready to confront the canyon's deepest secrets, and by doing so, challenge the very foundation of the official narrative. He packed his minimal gear, the ancient bone fragment and Finch's journal secured close to his heart, and stepped out into the vast, silent darkness of the canyon, ready for whatever lay ahead. The immediate consequences of Elias Thorne's desperate move were swift and brutal. Within hours of his departure from the hidden cache, his humble cabin, once a sanctuary, was thoroughly ransacked. Every book, every map, every personal item was tossed aside, a violent display of official displeasure. The small, private world he had meticulously built for himself was shattered. Simultaneously, his once clean record, a source of quiet pride throughout his decades of service, was officially tarnished. Fabricated reports of insubordination, reckless behavior, and even mental instability began to circulate through official channels. Elias Thorne, the dedicated ranger, was now an official fugitive, branded an enemy of the state. The fallout extended beyond his personal life. Word spread like wildfire among his fellow rangers. Some, out of genuine fear for their own careers and livelihoods, quickly distanced themselves, their faces hardening with suspicion when his name was mentioned. Others, perhaps loyal to the system or simply unwilling to risk Vance's wrath, actively participated in the search efforts, their radios crackling with updates on the hunt for their former colleague. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Seeing familiar faces turn against him, their trust replaced by apprehension and obedience. The weight of this betrayal, however, was somewhat mitigated by an unexpected turn of events. Not everyone bought into the official narrative. A small, disparate group of individuals, united by a shared skepticism of official truths, began to emerge from the shadows. Among them were independent researchers, amateur archaeologists, and local historians who had long harbored their own suspicions about the Grand Canyon's hidden past. They had quietly collected their own fragments of evidence, their own whispered stories of anomalies dismissed or suppressed. But the most crucial allies came from the very heart of the canyon's ancient heritage, the local indigenous elders. These elders, with their weathered faces and eyes that held the wisdom of generations, had their own historical knowledge of suppressed truths. Their oral traditions spoke of colossal beings and ancient civilizations that predated recorded history, stories often dismissed as myths by the modern world. They saw in Elias not a renegade, but a man seeking a truth that resonated with their own ancestral memories. Their cultural dynamics played a crucial, contrasting role. The government's approach was scientific, yet secretive, driven by control and containment. The elders, however, offered ancient wisdom, hidden knowledge of the canyon's spiritual and physical landscape, and a profound respect for the balance of nature. They had their own networks, their own ways of moving through the land unseen, their own understanding of its hidden paths and secret places. They provided not just information, but also sanctuary and guidance, their quiet strength a stark contrast to the frantic pursuit of Vance's agents. Elias grappled with a profound emotional turmoil during this period. Fear for his life was a constant companion, a cold knot in his stomach every time a distant helicopter hummed or a shadow shifted on the horizon. The burden of proof felt immense, a colossal weight resting squarely on his shoulders. He was not just fighting for his own vindication, but for the truth itself, a truth that had been deliberately obscured for decades, perhaps centuries. The isolation of his quest was immense. Despite the nascent alliance, the psychological impact of being branded an enemy of the state, a madman, was deeply unsettling. He was a man who had dedicated his life to protecting the canyon, and now he was hunted within its very confines. Every rustle of leaves, every distant call of a bird heightened his senses, turning the familiar sounds of his beloved canyon into potential threats. Yet, amidst this turmoil, a core of resilience remained. The bone fragment still tucked securely away, and Finch's journal with its cryptic coordinates served as constant reminders of what he was fighting for. He was not alone in his pursuit, and the ancient echoes of the canyon, now amplified by the wisdom of the elders, spurred him onward. This was no longer just his fight. It was a fight for history, for truth, and for the very soul of the Grand Canyon. Elias, guided by the elders through ancient, unmarked trails and using their knowledge of the canyon's intricate web of caves and hidden springs, successfully evaded Vance's relentless pursuit. He and his allies worked in secret, meticulously compiling the evidence. The small bone fragment Elias had hidden, now scientifically analyzed with the help of a sympathetic, independent paleontologist brought in by the researchers, proved to be undeniably anomalous, larger and denser than any known terrestrial species, hinting at a prehistoric lineage unlike anything in conventional textbooks. Finch's journal, authenticated by historical experts among the research group, provided the crucial historical context, detailing similar discoveries and subsequent suppressions from a century ago, proving this was not an isolated incident, but a pattern. The indigenous elders, through their oral traditions and ceremonial practices, revealed specific locations within the canyon where their ancestors had encountered and recorded the presence of these colossal beings. They shared stories, passed down through generations, of guardians of the canyon and the sacred duty to protect its ancient secrets. This collective testimony, combined with Elias's first-hand account and the physical evidence, formed an undeniable narrative. It was a tapestry woven from scientific data, historical records, and ancient wisdom, each thread reinforcing the others. The time came to release this truth. Elias, with the support of the independent researchers and the quiet blessing of the elders, made contact with an independent investigative journalist known for her integrity and courage. He carefully transferred all the compiled evidence, high-resolution photographs of the giant bones, the detailed analysis reports, scanned copies of Finch's journal, and recorded testimonies from the elders. The journalist, recognizing the monumental implications, worked tirelessly, cross-referencing, verifying every detail, and preparing her exposé. She understood the risks involved, but the sheer weight of the evidence was too compelling to ignore. When the story broke, it hit like a seismic shockwave. The journalist's report, published simultaneously across multiple independent news platforms and supported by a coordinated release of the scientific and historical data, created an immediate and undeniable public outcry. The sheer volume and irrefutability of the evidence left no room for doubt. Governments and scientific institutions worldwide were forced to acknowledge the findings. Director Vance, already under immense pressure from the failed containment of Elias, found himself at the epicenter of a global scandal. The detailed account of his agency's long history of suppression laid bare by the journalist's investigation, exposed decades of similar cover-ups concerning other anomalous discoveries. His cold authority and arrogance crumbled under the intense scrutiny. Public trust in his agency evaporated overnight. He was subjected to a brutal public inquiry, his carefully constructed career ruined by the scandal. Facing inevitable criminal charges for obstruction of justice and misuse of power, Vance was forced to resign in disgrace, his name synonymous with deceit and suppression. The agency he represented underwent a sweeping public investigation, revealing a systemic culture of secrecy and control that had stifled scientific progress and denied humanity access to its own history. The truth about the ancient giants of the Grand Canyon began to emerge, sparking an unprecedented global scientific debate. Paleontologists, archaeologists, and historians were forced to reevaluate fundamental assumptions about Earth's past and the origins of life. Universities launched new research initiatives, expeditions were planned, and the world looked at the Grand Canyon with fresh eyes, no longer just a natural wonder but a vault of unimaginable secrets. Elias Thorne, though forever changed by the ordeal, found a quiet, profound sense of vindication. He had lost his old life, but he had gained something far more valuable, the satisfaction of having revealed a truth that transcended his own existence. He returned to the canyon, not as a ranger, but as a guardian of a different kind, working closely with the indigenous communities to ensure the newly exposed sites were protected and studied with respect. His journey ended with a deep reflection on the nature of truth itself, how easily it could be buried, how fiercely it fought to surface, and the immense power of individual courage to bring it to light. The Grand Canyon, his lifelong companion, continued to hold its mysteries. But now some of its oldest, most astonishing secrets were finally beginning to be uncovered, waiting for humanity to truly understand its place in a much grander, more ancient story. The world had changed, and Elias Thorne had played a pivotal role in that change.